Hello, state conservation.
I want to look at a case in Michigan that should raise one simple question. How much power should a state agency have over people on their own private land? Not public land, not state land, their own private property. And why did a conservation officer need to confront two law-abiding citizens who were on their own private land, minding their business, abiding by state laws on the opening day of deer season? So I want to walk through this. Just the facts, nothing more, nothing less. So on November 15th, 2025, opening day of deer season here in Michigan, Dennis and Danielle Vanderlyn were sitting in their deer blind, just minding their own business on their own private land, like most Michiganders do for opening day of deer season. And so this land wasn't a questionable land. It wasn't mixed-use property. It was private property. They were licensed, they were compliant, and they were following all of the laws. Now, here's where it starts to get unusual. A conservation officer, Cameron Wright, approached their blind. Now, the filings say that the conservation officer approached from the neighbor's parcel, and then he came onto their property, came from behind the blind, and was at the opening of the deer blind door with his hand ready on his firearm. Now, imagine that for a second. You're hunting peacefully, according to the law, and then out of nowhere, a conservation officer shows up at your blind and is at the door of your blind. No one can anticipate this, and no one's ready for that. So my question for you is, do you think that an officer should be allowed to approach a private hunting blind without a warrant or any suspected violation? According to the lawsuit, it says that Officer Wright came to the Vanderlyns and said that there are serious accusations against them. The filings don't exactly say what those accusations are, but it does make one thing crystal clear. The Vanderlyns weren't breaking any laws. They had legal licenses and they were operating within the rules. But still, on top of all of that, the officer said that he was still going to report them to the prosecutor. Those are the exact words used in the complaint. Not a warning, not a conversation, a report to the prosecutor. The lawsuit doesn't list specific charges that he was going to pursue against them. It only states that he threatened prosecution despite observing no violations. And that's a key detail, and it matters. And I think I have to ask the question, should an officer be able to threaten you with a violation even though that there's no evidence of it? So after this encounter, the Vanderlyns decided to take action. Instead of filing just one case, they ended up filing two. One is federal, and the other one is in the Michigan Court of Claims. So with the federal case, they're arguing that the officer violated their Fourth Amendment rights. That's the amendment that protects Americans from unlawful seizures and searches. Their claim is simple. They were detained without cause, and they were threatened to be prosecuted without any evidence and anything to show what they were being charged with. And last, but certainly not least, a government official entered onto their private land without any warrant, without any probable cause, and no evidence to throw against the Vanderlyns. So I have to ask the question, roles reversed and this would happen to you, how would you respond to this situation? Now, the second law actually might be the bigger of the two, and that's because it's challenging Michigan's open field doctrine. So what the open field doctrine talks about is basically private land, even if it's posted, doesn't fall under the same classifications that a home or building would. Under this doctrine, officers can just walk onto a private field even if they don't have a warrant. The Vanderlyns argue that Michigan's Constitution promises more protection than that. Article 1, Section 11 is very clear. They believe that under Michigan law, private land should be private land, not open territory for warrantless entry. If their argument succeeds, it could reshape how DNR officers operate across the entire state. It wouldn't just affect the Vanderlyns, it would affect every landowner in Michigan. So here's my next question for you. Do you guys believe that private land, if posted, should be treated the same as a building or a private dwelling? This case raises a question that goes far beyond hunting. Should a state wildlife agency have the authority to enter private land without a warrant? Should an officer be allowed to confront two legal hunters and threaten prosecution without identifying a single violation? And should Michigan residents accept an interpretation of the law that threatens rural property as if it isn't private at all? And no one is arguing that wildlife laws don't matter, because they do. Game wardens have a hard job. And what happens when that enforcement crosses a line? When enforcement becomes intrusion? When compliance actually doesn't matter because a law enforcement agency can still come onto your land and accuse you of doing something with no evidence? And essentially that's what the courts will decide. So again, another question for you. How much authority should the DNR have on private land? So both cases were filed in November 24 of 2025. Both cases are filed and neither have been dismissed, so they're both going to litigation. This means no rulings yet, no conclusions, no judgments, just facts of what the evidence contains. So those are the facts. A deer hunter a DNR officer with no facts to bring to the table, and a threat to take the report to the prosecutor. And now, two major lawsuits that could reshape the future of how Michigan perceives private landowners and hunters moving forward. This isn't about choosing sides, it's about asking what powers a government agency should have over law-abiding people on their own property, and whether the protections of Michigan's Constitution mean what they say. So let me know what you guys' thoughts and opinions are on this one. I don't think that this is getting enough attention that it deserves. And I heard it through a friend of a friend, and I had to do some research to make sure that all of this stuff is valid. From what I found on the internet, this is all the facts of it. I tried not to include my opinion on it. This is just the facts of what I found. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you in the next video.